If there's one thing I'm certain of in life, it's that Alabama will always have a good offensive line. Year in and year out, it feels that we are talking about multiple future NFL stars on the Alabama offensive line, and this year's no different. I think 4 of the Alabama starters could go on to get taken in the top 100 of next year's draft, and Alabama left tackle Kadyn Proctor is the crowning jewel of them all. A player with as high of a ceiling as any player in the entire draft class. Today, we are going to be discussing if the Kadyn Proctor hype is real and ultimately where I think he should go in the 2026 NFL Draft. If you guys are new to the channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button, as we will be doing prospect breakdowns just like this every week on this channel. Comment down below which prospects you guys want to see me talk about in a future episode. Hit the pinned comment to get my full draft guide for a one-time purchase of $20, and without further ado, let's take a deep dive into Kadyn Proctor. Proctor was an incredibly sought-after high school recruit in the 2023 recruiting class. He was a 5-star and was listed as the number 2 player in the entire country. He initially committed to Iowa before flipping his commitment to Alabama. He would enter the transfer portal after his true freshman season and commit to Iowa again, and then enter a final time and go back to Alabama again. Despite the indecisiveness, Proctor, as a player, stepped in right away as a true freshman for Alabama, and as to be expected, had a rocky first year as a starter, allowing 36 pressures and 12 sacks on the year. As a sophomore, however, things were a lot cleaner for Proctor. In 639 snaps, Proctor allowed 15 pressures and 3 sacks on the year for Alabama. While the numbers were still not elite, the traits and potential that Proctor brings to the table along the offensive line is astronomically high. The first thing that just pops off the screen when you are watching Proctor is his ridiculous size for the offensive tackle position. He's listed at 6'7", 360 pounds. That is an unbelievable number, but I think he holds his weight pretty well. On top of that, he provides solid length to the position as well, with 34.5-inch arms. From a size standpoint alone, things are really enticing for Proctor, and teams are going to want to get him into their building to try and see if they can mold him into a future NFL starter. For this spotlight, I'm going to break this down into 2 parts. We usually go over the strengths and weaknesses as a whole, but I want to go over his pass protection and run blocking all in one overarching narrative. So let's start with the run game with Proctor. Overall, I was pretty impressed by what Proctor was able to do as a run blocker. Typically, when you get a player who is nearly 370 pounds, you are expecting a more lumbering mover, but I don't really think that shows up for him. While he isn't the most elite athlete, I thought he showed some really nice movement abilities and the ability to absolutely drive guys off the ball in the run game. He has a nice first step, and he showed the ability to locate players in the second level and absolutely detonate them into the earth. That is one thing I absolutely love about Proctor, is that he has incredible raw strength and power to just maul guys in the run game, and I thought that he showed that time and time again for Alabama. If anything, I was left a little disappointed that he didn't show it more. There were times when I thought he could have played with more power, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. Proctor has graded well in the run game over the last couple of years, and ultimately there aren't too many worries that I have in that phase. One thing that I think will be brought up is the lack of outside zone blocking experience. He's not been asked to do that very much, and to be honest, I don't think he has the top end movement skills to be a very good outside zone run blocker. While I think he is a good overall athlete for his size, I think he's better suited for a gap rushing scheme, because at times he does lumber a little bit, and I just don't view him as a top tier athlete for outside zone, but in a gap rushing scheme, I think he provides you the quickness and the ability to climb the second level that you're looking for, and Alabama primarily was a gap heavy offense last year. Pass protection, however, is where the conversation completely shifts. There are a lot of inconsistencies in Proctor's game that he absolutely needs to get cleaned up if he is going to be a starting tackle at the next level. I think the area where Proctor really struggled was in his footwork. There were so many instances where he would overset and as a result would get beat outside to speed. He had some pretty bad inconsistencies when going up against speed rushers because he is pretty slow to react, he is pretty heavy and lumbering as a lateral mover, and on top of that, I was left really disappointed in his ability to counter pass rushers. I thought he was too reliant on his size, and he really showed the lack of any sort of counterattack against more nuanced rushers. This is a player who has allowed 51 pressures in just 2 years of playing, and a big part of it is his slow feet and his stiff hands. But I think it goes further than that. Proctor plays with really high pads, and he leaves his inside shoulder exposed really at all times. Because he is a bit of a lumbering mover laterally, it does show up in pass protection. He lunges a lot, which is a very common theme amongst tall tackles. There are a lot of inconsistencies in pass protection that do remind me of Evan Neal at times. I will say there are some really impressive reps on tape that he's able to play at a high level. I thought his ability to long arm defenders was really impressive, and there are moments of positive pass rushing counters, and when he got his hands properly placed, there are some dominant reps on tape. I also think that Proctor has really good anchor. He's one of the most difficult offensive linemen to move that I've ever watched, and while it's not perfect, I did think his anchor was better than some of the other players in this draft class that are getting similar hype. It's all about consistency, and right now, Proctor might be the most inconsistent pass protector in the entire draft class. Kadyn Proctor is a really fun player because the traits are absolutely nuts. He's big, he has long arms, and is the type of players who NFL teams love to bet on. However, I think there are some major red flags in his game, and he struggled to finish the 2024 season, against Oklahoma and Michigan especially. He's a really tough player to evaluate, but I currently have Proctor as my number 5 offensive tackle in this class. I do have major red flags in pass pro, and I just don't know if I view him as a top tier superstar athlete for the position. But I still have a first round grade on him, but I will need to see a big jump from him in 2025. In terms of a scheme fit, I think Proctor fits best in a gap rushing attack. We touched on this earlier, and because he's not the greatest athlete to run a lot of wide zone, I think he could be a dominant gap run blocker, so that's where I want to see him play in the NFL. Coming up with a comparison for Kadyn Proctor was incredibly difficult. I will say, he's eerily similar to Evan Neal as a prospect to me. A big tackle with good athleticism to drive guys off the ball in the run game, has some power, but a guy that's so heavy on his feet in pass protection and was consistently blown by speed rushers. That's my low-end comparison for Proctor. I do think there is a world where he's just another Evan Neal, but I do think there are some other players he reminds me of. Cam Robinson, Tyron Smith, and Mekhi Becton are all going to be players that are going to come up, and he does remind me a little bit of Tyron Smith, just a big freak offensive lineman that is a decent athlete, can make plays in the run game, but if he does clean up some of the inconsistencies in pass protection, Tyron Smith was a stonewall for Dallas for a number of years, so that's my high-end comparison. But we don't get a lot of tackles like this very often, but for better or worse, I think Evan Neal is a very realistic outcome. Kadyn Proctor is a power blocker. He is a really solid overall run blocker with alien-like size for the offensive tackle position. I think his ceiling is sky high, but I also think he is as low a floor as any prospect in this class. He's a very unique prospect, but ultimately, I believe that Kadyn Proctor will be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft.